what about Ted Cruz? Do you think is he allowed to run for president? If he wins, is he allowed to do it? I said, I really don't know, because he was born in Canada. He was actually a citizen of Canada until 15 months ago, which a lot of people don't understand. And that's a big problem.
As hard as we and others have tried, we cannot uncover anybody who actually was involved in the writing of the U.S. Constitution to appear for an interview and tell us what exactly they were thinking when the document went to paper. So we therefore must satisfy our need for truth with logical interpretation. We're once again locked in this, what some would call useless, others would call critically important discourse over where Texas Senator Ted Cruz was born, how he was born, and what his actual eligibility is to become president of the United States. In the end, as with most issues, it comes down to one or two words and a seeming endless stream of educated opinions. So let's begin. Let's welcome in constitutional law professor at Widener University's Delaware Law School, author of the Washington Post opinion piece, Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president, Brigid McManamon. Joined by the professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, where he focuses on constitutional law and conflict of laws, Kermit Roosevelt. Professors, I want to thank you both for being here. I feel like I'm in austere company right now because I finally have professors here to talk to. All right, Professor McManamon, let's get to you first, because your article is the one that started a lot of this. Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president. Explain to us why you hold that true.
Well, the term natural-born citizen, which is the requirement to be president, comes from the common law. And the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly said if there's a term in the Constitution that comes from common law, that's where you turn. And the common law is quite clear. People born within the territory of the sovereign, originally England, now the United States, are natural-born citizens. Those who are born outside of the territory are not natural-born citizens.
To make it clear, in your article, you point out this common law, and this is an 18th century English jurist by the name of William Blackstone who made this first note here, and then we took it and then brought it into the Constitution. James Madison did. Is it not fair to say, though, that under James Madison, and you point this out as well, it is an established maxim that birth is a criterion of allegiance? It is what applies in the U.S., but those words are not in the Constitution, correct?
The phrase natural-born citizen is the Constitution. The Constitution does not have a definitional section.
Right, it does not. That's important to point out here. Now, Professor Roosevelt, let me come to you. What's your take on this? Do you believe that Ted Cruz is eligible to be president under the way the Constitution is written?
I believe he is, although I think it's not an entirely clear question. The Constitution doesn't define natural-born citizen, but it seems quite plausible to me to think that it means nothing more than someone who is a citizen from the moment of birth, or a citizen by the conditions of birth. And it used to be under the common law that meant born in the United States, but Congress by statute has changed that. Now you can be a citizen from birth if you're born to a U.S. parent who has some connection with the United States. Ted Cruz fits those requirements. He's a citizen from birth, therefore I think he's eligible.
Okay, now that's an important point. When you mentioned natural born, and I want to ask both of you this, because the Congressional Research Service in 2011 looked at natural-born citizen, and they said that a natural-born citizen is either by being born in the United States and under its jurisdiction, or by being born abroad to U.S. citizen parents. Also, two former U.S. Solicitor Generals in the Harvard Law Review said that Cruz does qualify as a natural-born citizen. So, Professor McManamon, let me come to you. Looking at this, and with the CRS saying that this is, and this defines, natural-born citizen, why should this not stand then as the final solution?
Because the CRS cannot trump the Constitution or the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court has held that you are either a citizen by natural birth, a natural-born citizen, or you are naturalized. And naturalized includes not only what we normally think of as naturalization, the immigrant who comes here and goes through the process, but according to the Supreme Court, it also includes someone who is naturalized at birth in a foreign country by means of a congressional statute.
Is it not fair to say, though, that we do not have a definitive Supreme Court ruling, and that's what a lot of people are saying?
Depends on what you mean by definitive. If you mean, has the Supreme Court ever ruled on a presidential candidate? No. But the Supreme Court has given a very clear definition of natural-born citizen, albeit in a different context.
So, Professor Roosevelt, here we go. We have all these different opinions here, including a Supreme Court which has not definitively ruled at this point. So, where are we here? And I hate to ask this in this fashion, but are we nitpicking here? to the point where this is not necessarily that important? I know that'll anger a lot of people, but he was still born of an American mother in a country, and they say that makes him a citizen. So are we nitpicking?
Well, it depends on what you think is important. It depends on what you think the purpose of this clause is. So if you think the point is to separate out foreigners from people who have been American citizens from birth because we question the allegiance of foreigners but not of birthright citizens, then yes, it is sort of nitpicking because Cruz is a birthright citizen.
What would this then do, Professor McManamon, and again, just to other people, and I know people who were born overseas of one parent being an American citizen, and they to this day are full natural-born citizens. Wouldn't this just start to unravel decades of people's citizenship right now and make a mess of things?
No, you're confusing the difference between citizenship and natural-born citizenship. Of course, for most of the time in the United States, people born abroad or children born abroad to American parents have been naturalized, but they have not been natural-born citizens. And interestingly, I've been contacted since the piece went out by dozens of Americans who were born abroad to American parents who have confessed that they have known from day one that they were not natural-born citizens, although they were American citizens.
Professor Roosevelt, I only have about 15 seconds. Would you see this going then to some sort of a court of law if Ted Cruz was elected?
I think ultimately that's unlikely, and that's the other thing we should keep in mind. A judge is probably not going to decide this. The American voters will decide it, Congress might decide it, but it's unlikely we'll get a judicial ruling.
I have the feeling that we're going to be back here again for the two of you because you have both provided some real common sense and some logic to this, and I have a feeling also it's not going to go away. Professor Mary Brigid McManamon, Professor Kermit Roosevelt, thank you so much for joining us. We will speak again soon. Stay with us. The fastest 60 minutes in news, The Hard Line, will continue.